What is up, Formula One fans? My name is Chris,
And my name is James.
and we're the Formula One Bros.
Just two twins with a love of F1 to share our thoughts on everything in the world of Formula One.
And welcome back to our podcast. We are officially in for the first time in 2024. It is officially race week.
Yeah, buddy.
We've wrapped up testing, and we can say it's race week on Sunday as opposed to Monday because our first two races of the season are going to be on Saturday.
Which is very peculiar. I'm not sure. I wonder why they chose to do it that way.
I will actually tell you. I'm going to look at my calendar. It should be. Hold on.
Well, because isn't one of them? Oh wait, no, never mind. That's a ways away from now.
So it is because the start of Ramadan is on the Sunday of the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix weekend.
That makes sense.
So they needed to move the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix to Saturday.
Mm-hmm.
And because it's a back-to-back, we're starting the season with a doubleheader. They also needed to move the Bahrain Grand Prix. So it's because
that makes sense. Ramadan.
Yep, Ramadan starts.
That's
technically Ramadan. Yeah, it's evening. It's the evening of March the 10th. Starts officially on the 11th and goes until April 9th.
Which that's a night race, so that makes sense. That makes sense as to why I had not known that's why they did that. I thought they were like, let's try to do what we did in Vegas.
Yeah, I thought that too. But no, it's because of Ramadan. So we are preemptively wishing all of our listeners who celebrate Ramadan a very happy Ramadan in advance. We'll get there obviously in a couple weeks, but for now we have a lot to focus on heading into the Bahrain Grand Prix. So today is going to be our official predictions episode. Wednesday we'll have our first Grand Prix view episode. And then we jump right in next day into free practice and to the Formula One race. But first, testing. We finally got to see 20 very rich men drive around very expensive cars on a very funny looking circle. So
very rich men.
To wrap up testing, what are thoughts, impressions? There was a lot of stuff going on in those 3 days.
There were a lot of very interesting things. There are some teams that have improved significantly, some teams who haven't improved significantly. I think going into testing, this was kind of like the biggest, one of the bigger question marks as to whether or not, how testing was going to go, who we were going to see, make improvements, fall back, stay the same, all that kind of stuff. The results of testing was probably the most, just there was a lot of unknowns going into it, more so than other seasons. Obviously, there were a lot of things that we expected, like Red Bull was, seems like they're the quickest car. And there's some other things like pecking order things that I think that are pretty consistent with what we thought or with what we're from last year. But it's really, really hard to say because it is just testing. So, we don't really know how it's going to go.
Yeah, I think that's a big thing is that we don't really know, but I think there are some things there are some trends that popped up. And I think for me, the thing that I just really enjoyed about testing is so many teams had in the middle of last year had started adjusting their philosophy to move more towards what Red Bull was doing. And so this year, I mean, there was probably like 5, 6, 7 teams that I can think of that were, or maybe probably even all of them, like Haas, Williams had changed their philosophy over in the middle of the season, McLaren,
Mercedes
was working on stuff. Ferrari was working on stuff. AlphaTauri, now Visa Cash App Racing Bulls. There were a lot of teams in there that Sauber or Kick was another one. So there were a lot of teams that were kind of in the process of changing over their philosophy from last year. And so this year, all of the news coming out of these teams was essentially, we've all made improvements. We've taken a big step, but it was all kind of like all of those kind of sentiments within those teams was caveated by, well, we don't know how everybody else has improved. And
Mhm.
obviously there's still the dark horse of like, or the big elephant in the room, which is, has Red Bull moved the bar at all, which they seem to have emphatically moved the bar. So, which we'll talk a lot about later, but I think that was the coolest thing for testing to me, just to kind of see how each team improved, the ways in which they did, and how is that going to kind of affect the pecking order a little bit.
Mhm. Yeah.
Which I think it will shake some things up. So, I think the teams that I think did well did the most well on their improvements, I think Ferrari, Visa Cash App Racing Bulls was another surprise, and Williams too, I think.
And Haas.
And Haas. So, well, I'll talk about Haas in a minute, but with Williams, I think the biggest thing coming out of them was, it's still fast in a straight line. I think they still have trouble in the low speed corners because there was a lot of locking up in the 9-10 combination, but both drivers were saying how less wind sensitive the car is, that they felt like the platform was a lot more predictable. And I think the messaging out of the team from James Vowles is that they actually have a platform that they can do a lot of development with. So I think Williams is very quietly a team that I'm most excited for.
Yeah, I would say so too. And I'm been huge fans of Williams and wanting to see them improve. And it seems like they're on their pathway to figuring it out and kind of getting out of this rut that they've been in. So, which is good. And that's all thanks to James Vowles, the team leadership. So props to them. But yeah.
Well, and you mentioned Haas earlier, so we can chat a little bit about them. We can chat about them, but in the predictions. But I think it's really interesting that they were the team that ran the most laps in testing.
Yeah, and what's really awesome about that is the fact that one of the indicators of a team not necessarily having a successful season. Well, I guess having a successful season. And being like consistent, and able to bring a car to the track week in and week out that's going to be able to do well. The biggest indicator of that is, laps run in testing. So it seems like, with the fact that Haas, the car that I think everyone thinks is going to finish 10th, I think Haas having ran the most amount of laps, I think is a really, really good indicator for that team that things are maybe they're starting to come around the corner and they're starting to become this breath of life in the team that we haven't seen probably since 2018, 2019 ish. So I think it's really, really cool to see, and I'm excited for them, the fact that, I think that's a really, really huge success for winter testing, the fact that Haas ran more laps than any other team on the grid.
Yeah, and that's really important because for two reasons. One, that means that car is reliable, which they've struggled with reliability in the past. I mean, so his Ferrari, because it's basically a Ferrari junior car essentially, but they've struggled with reliability in the past. So it's good because like you said, the car is going to be consistent, but it's also good because it seems that the car is going to be reliable, which is good. So when points are on offer, they'll have the ability to go get it. The other thing too is their long run pace was much more consistent than it was last year. And so, of course, when you're actually driving around a track in anger with other cars around you and you're actually racing, things might change a little bit, but their stint simulation and their race simulation seems that they're really starting to get on top of the tire wear troubles that they had last year. So I think that the two teams not named Ferrari and Red Bull that impressed me the most in testing were Haas and Williams.
Yeah, I would agree. I think they had an extremely, extremely successful test, and they should be very, very happy with where they're at.
Yeah,
going into the first race at least.
I agree. So moving on ahead, that kind of caps off testing. One thing that now we're kind of in the mode of is looking at heading into the first race weekend, looking at, what are some of the major storylines that we're going to be following? What are some of the big things, not just in the first race weekend, but at the beginning of the season, some overarching major storylines that we're kind of following, that we're going to be keeping following, that have kind of been simmering underneath the surface a little bit during testing. And in talking about storylines that we're going to be following, we can't not talk about Red Bull and Christian Horner.
Yeah, that's going to be that whole situation. I mean, it's moving quickly, which I said in a previous episode that it probably would. They probably want to get all this stuff taken care of before they get too deep into the season. But it's still up in the air as to what's going to happen. The big storyline is Christian going to be let go? Is he going to resign? Is he going to, what's going to happen? And if Christian does leave, there are a lot of questions as to who's going to take over Red Bull, who's going to leave Red Bull. I have a feeling there are going to be a lot of people that are going to jump ship. I mean, a bunch of Red Bull people already jumped ship and went to Ferrari and Aston Martin last year. And I can only see that keep continuing to happen with how, Ferrari's made a lot of improvements. Mercedes and McLaren too are looking to make improvements. So, there are a lot of questions. And the biggest question mark is, what's Adrian Newey going to do? I don't really think that that's going to affect this year too much. I mean, it might maybe towards the end if they're not able to upgrade the car as quickly as everyone else without, the likes of Adrian Newey or Christian Horner at the team. But I mean, with how strong they were in testing, I think they've got this year comfortably in the bag, but that'll bring up a lot of questions as to what's going to happen with Red Bull next year.
Yeah. And I agree. So it's not necessarily just about Christian Horner, but it's about the knock-on effects of the team. And if he stays, if he goes, what happens? What are the knock-on effects of the team? And yeah, like you said, I don't know that it's going to affect a whole lot this year. If it affects anything this year, just maybe procedurally how the team runs, which, given how far ahead I believe them to be, I don't think is really going to do a whole lot of anything, maybe at the end of the season. But yeah, it's so that's the most important thing. And Christian Horner has been very emphatic that as long as he's still there, he's going to be acting as the figurehead of the team, which he's continuing to do, which I think has been a little awkward. I think it is a little awkward having him around. He's being investigated by not just the racing team, but by the parent company. And this has come down from the parent company, and he's still acting in a team principal role. I think that it is currently, and I think it's going to continue as long as the investigation is ongoing, to make things really, really awkward. So, I mean, and there's already been, people in the media asking him constantly about, what's the status, what's going on, what's happening, and he's just basically repeating the same things, which is, I'm not at liberty to comment about it. And the most important thing out of any of this is that the investigation is thorough, it's done properly, and the results of which warrant are warranted based off of the transgressions that happen if this does end up being true.
Yeah.
But the most important thing is that it's done properly and it's handled properly.
And ultimately, I think the biggest things with this is there are two things. What dominoes are going to fall and in which direction are they going to fall?
Yep.
And the other thing is, we've seen in the past, a figurehead of a team leaves and it completely falls apart. And we'll kind of see if Red Bull is going to be the team that one person is removed and it's just next man up, and that everything keeps running as operating as normal, or does this go deeper than it actually is, and are a lot of people going to leave and the team falls apart? So there are a lot of and it's just because we don't know the nature of what transpired and the status of the investigation as of current. And so those are the two big things: what dominoes are going to fall, where they're going to fall, and is the team going to stay together? How well are they going to be able to stay together once the dominoes do fall?
Yeah. Yeah, that's the biggest thing. And obviously we are going to leave it there because to due respect to the investigation, we don't want to speculate. We don't want to peddle or cause any rumors. But that is definitely one of the biggest things that we're going to be following, because I know if I am Red Bull, not the racing team, but the parent company, well, and the racing team, but if I'm Red Bull as a whole, I want this resolved, by the first or second race weekend.
Mhm.
I want it done thoroughly, but I don't want this to impact the racing season too much.
Yeah.
So hopefully we'll have good, proper results in the next week or so.
Yeah, because ultimately Red Bull's a brand, and they're going to want to, get it
Yeah.
taken care of soon.
And it's already having an effect on their partners or potential partners. The Ford Motor Company has come out and said that, that they are keeping a close eye on things, and
Yeah.
the results of this investigation will 100% have an impact on their involvement in their powertrain project for 2026.
Yeah, because Ford being an American company, that for those of you who are listening and maybe aren't familiar with American companies like Ford, they are branded as a family oriented company, good family values, and with Christian Horner acting in bad faith, doesn't necessarily look good for Ford.
Yeah, so I know,
and they're going to want to protect their brand.
Yeah. So Ford is Ford, and I think the larger American motor companies at stake, I think, are going to be taking a look at this. But it's kind of a wait and see at this point, and we just hope for a proper, well done investigation and resolution. So moving on, some other big storylines I think that we're going to be following is, at least for me, is not just is Red Bull ahead, but how far are they ahead?
Mm-hmm.
I think the result of testing was very clear that they are very ominously very, very, very quick. And there's speculation that they weren't even running their power unit on full beans, and not only was their long run pace consistent, it got better as the laps went on.
Yeah,
so
it's like their air degradation was non-existent.
Yeah. So it's very ominous. And so for me, it's not a question of if they are ahead, it's by how much.
Mm-hmm.
That's, I think, one thing that I'm really going to be looking at. And in this,
I think the only other thing with Red Bull that I can think of that could potentially be an Achilles heel is, Checo, they did have some mechanical issues. Checo's car had to be stopped I think it was twice throughout testing.
I think it was some brake issues.
So granted, I'm not looking too far into that, because they were having mechanical issues during winter testing in 2022 and in the first two races in 2022. And everyone's like, yep, this is Ferrari's year. Red Bull made a poor car that can't last. And then, the second half of the season, Red Bull wiped the floor with literally everyone. So
yeah,
I'm not looking too far into it, but that could potentially be a small little tiny hiccup, but right now they look impervious.
Yeah, they really do. I think if there's anything, it's going to be that. And I think the other thing, I know we're spending a lot of time with Red Bull, but Red Bull has a lot of question marks right now, not about the car, but the other thing too is, Sergio Perez from race one from Bahrain is going to be fighting to keep his seat in 2024. So with him, it's going to be, one of those things where, how close can he get to Max? And I think they're going to be putting a lot of pressure on him. I think there's already a lot of pressure on him, and in their long run pace comparison between number two drivers, Sainz and Perez, in the race simulation, Sainz would have finished a minute ahead of Sergio Perez based on those paces. And now we can't say too much about like fuel loads, but because we can't say too much because we don't know the fuel loads, but historically Red Bull and Ferrari run very similar fuel loads. And we can gather that based on the gaps that there are in preseason testing, and then the gaps that exist in qualifying when they actually get to the first race, very similar across those two entities. So if they are running on similar fuel loads, I think Sergio Perez might be in trouble. And with that, another thing that I'm going to be following is how well does Daniel Ricciardo do in the opening part of the season.
Yes, because that'll determine what happens with Checo.
Right, and Red Bull have been ruthless in their pursuit of championships, and we saw it happen with Pierre Gasly in 2019. If they think that Sergio Perez's performance is going to hinder them from winning a constructors championship, and they believe that somebody else, i.e. Daniel Ricciardo, if he acquits himself well in the first half of the season, they might make that switch, or they might just straight up dump Perez and put Liam Lawson in the V carb. So I think that's a storyline that obviously will not be resolved in the first race, but something early season, it's going to need to be important. And Sergio Perez is going to need to get off on the right foot right away, very quick in the opening season. And so is Daniel Ricciardo. So those are two drivers that I'm going to be watching like a hawk this first race weekend. And really throughout the season too.
Yeah. You know? I think the only other storyline or another storyline to follow is, how close is the pack going to be this year? It seems like the back markers have made some significant progress, like Williams and Haas have made some significant progress. The other thing too is, how close are the next teams behind Red Bull? How close are they going to be to Red Bull? Has Ferrari made the improvements that they planned on and say that they have? And have Mercedes and McLaren also made those improvements as well. Yeah. And that's going to be the fight for second. I think just like last year, the fight for second is going to be really, really close this year.
I agree. Yeah, I totally agree.
Three, and maybe depending on Aston Martin, there could be 4 teams that could win second place this year.
Yeah, I really do think that I really do agree with that. I think of those teams, the team that I am looking forward to see the most is Mercedes, because they had a really quiet test. They were struggling with their setup throughout the week. It wasn't until the real last day where I think like watching them go around on track where it actually looked like they weren't struggling with the car. So I think they're still trying to figure some things out. I think they didn't have a bad testing by any stretch of the imagination. And I think, they definitely are capable of getting second in the Constructors' Championship, but have they done enough to understand their car? Because they've talked about in 2022 when they had issues, they're like, we just need to understand the car. They came back in 2023. They're like, we understand the car. We've made the adjustments, yada, yada, yada. And 2023 was worse than 2022. It was just a worse season. And then they make all these changes, which is good. And I think they do have a good car, but then all of a sudden 6 months after he signs, they lose Lewis Hamilton a year in advance to Ferrari for 2025, which is a huge vote of no confidence. So I think Mercedes is the team of those championship contending teams. I think Mercedes is going to be the one that has the most question marks, I think, and is going to have the most eyes. Can they really deliver? Because and we've seen for the past 2 years, they talk and talk and talk and talk and talk. We need a better car. We need to understand. If I hear Toto Wolff say we need to understand the car because we owe it to the drivers to give them a good car one more time, I'm going to just stop watching Formula One, because he says it so often and so rarely have they delivered results over the past 2 years. So it's really put up or shut up time for Mercedes. And do I think they can do it? Absolutely. It's Mercedes. But that's one of the biggest things. They have a lot of question marks going into the season.
Yeah, which is really unfortunate to see them struggling so much because of their recent run of dominance since 2014 and almost a decade.
Yeah, the unbiased Formula One fan in me says seeing Mercedes struggle is hard to watch, but the very, very biased Ferrari fan in me says keep going.
Yeah.
So
it's going to be, and watching, granted, now I'm not taking what happens on Drive to Survive at, exactly what happened, because it's Netflix and they're trying to create drama. But after watching the 6th episode of Drive to Survive, it just makes me feel like, I don't know, there's a lot of apathy. And I think they're resting on their reputation of having been a dominant team. And they're kind of like not work. I don't know. It seems like they're not working as hard as they had in the past. And they're just kind of resting on the fact that we're the best team in Formula One.
Yeah. And I think we touched a little bit about this on the Lewis Hamilton to Ferrari episode, in that, and I think that's a very valid point, that, Ferrari is a team that has everything to gain right now, and they're incredibly motivated. They're working really, really hard to do it. And there's probably just more at that team that excites Lewis Hamilton. And there's probably just a much better vibe around that team. And I would not be surprised if Mercedes was getting apathetic or complacent, or just like, oh, well, we're Mercedes, this is the way that we do things, and not willing to take risks or not willing to change things up. We know over the past couple of years, they've struggled to listen to their drivers' feedback when it comes to the upgrades that car needs.
Mm-hmm.
They straight up didn't listen to Lewis Hamilton's suggestions when they were making the 2023 car. So there probably is a little bit of apathy that's creeping in. And I think there is a lot more at Ferrari that is exciting right now to Lewis Hamilton. And I think
100%.
Yeah, again, you said I don't want to glean too much into what Drive to Survive says, but that 6th episode was really interesting to watch, now knowing the result of what has come with his contract. So, is there anything else that you want to mention before we move on to our predictions?
I'll also be excited to see how far Alpine has dropped, because the reports coming out of the paddock for winter testing sounds like Alpine might actually be the worst team on the grid, and not Haas or Williams.
They did not have a good testing.
No,
I don't think they're going to be last, but this might just be me being like, oh, they're a works team. How is that possible?
Yeah.
But I don't think they'll be last, but I think it's the early part of the season for them is going to be a big struggle. I think they had Haas seemed to be the slowest, but I think Alpine had the most difficult test overall. I think so. Yeah, that's another good one.
Yeah, so that'll be interesting to watch. And I said earlier, I'm excited to see. I'm not excited because I don't want to see a team slip back so far, especially one that has a really really strong pedigree in Formula One. But it'll be interesting to see, is what I really mean. But those are all the big storylines that coming up in my head to think about. But yeah. Oh, I'll also be interested to see how Daniel Ricciardo does at Visa Cash App Racing Bulls, how he does there. And I think that'll really, whether or not he performs well there, will put a really big target on Checo's back. So we'll see about that.
Yeah, I won't talk about any of this anymore, because I'm sure we'll talk about it a lot in our predictions. But I think the team that had the best test was 100% Ferrari. I think they were the most impressive, especially on day 2 and day 3. I think they were the most impressive.
They're very consistent, and they ran a lot of laps.
Very consistent. They ran a lot of laps, and I think
on day 2 alone, Ferrari had the most amount of laps run.
Yep. So, and out of the 2 days, of course, testing lap times don't count for anything, but they were fastest on day 2 and day 3. I still think that they are at a deficit when it comes to race pace. But
because Ferrari was fastest in 2019 testing, and look how that season ended up for them.
So we'll talk more about them when it comes to predictions. I have a sneaking suspicion we're on the same page when it comes to Ferrari, but we will move on. So for this part of our episode, when it comes to our predictions, we are going to be predicting what we think will be the Constructors' Championship order, and we will crown a Constructors and a Drivers' World Champion. and we will keep an eye on that through the remainder of the season, and we'll come back to this at the end of the season and once again laugh about how wrong we were.
Yeah. Like me saying that Alfa Romeo was going to be 4th last year.
That is still the funniest thing I think you've ever said. Anyway, moving right along, we are going to start at the bottom and move up to the top. Starting us off, who do you believe, James, will finish in 10th place in the Constructors' Championship?
I'm going to go with Haas. I mean, granted, we've said this before. I think they have improved a lot. So I think it'll be a very competitive. I think they will get some points this year. I think they'll score points. They'll be competitive. I think they will be 10th, but I think they will be a lot more competitive this year.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree with the sentiment that no matter who comes in 10th, I think it is going to be a competitive 10th. And
Yeah.
I have Kick Sauber in 10th.
I have them a little higher.
Here's the thing. The bottom 4 teams flip a coin.
Yeah.
I really think it's going to be that close. I think Alpine is not going to let themselves be last. I think Williams is the fastest of those 4. Haas had really, really good race pace, and I think if they manage their tires really well, so I really do think it's a coin flip between those 4. But I'm going to put Kick Sauber in 10th.
Cool. So in 9th, I have Alpine. I would have put them higher, but then after seeing how poor their testing went, I can't put them any higher than 9th right now. They just look really abysmal.
Yeah, I have Haas in 9th. I think they're if they really got on top of their tire wear issues, and because that car is fast. Haas has always been fast. They just chew through tires like
a
nobody's
Ferrari.
business. Yeah, they chew through tires like a Ferrari. And so I think if what testing has shown comes true, I think they're going to be really strong in the races now. So I'm going to put Haas in 9th.
In 8th, you have them last, but I have Kick in 8th. I think Guan Yu Zhou is a really, really strong driver, and Valtteri Bottas is obviously a very strong driver, very talented driver. I mean, shoot, he was at Mercedes for quite a while. So I have Kick in 8th. I think that car is a little bit better than the Alpine, but yeah, again, you're totally right. That bottom 4 flip a coin.
Yeah, and I have Kick in 10th, but I think I could very well easily see them getting 8th. I am not convinced yet by what I've seen so far that that's going to happen.
Yeah.
So I have in 8th, I have Alpine.
You have Alpine in 8th.
In 8th. I don't think, and I think, I pretty much think that that's their ceiling. I really do. I think that's their ceiling.
Which is really unfortunate because
it's a works team.
4 years ago, they were competing for 3rd.
Yep.
Anyway, so 7th place and the top of the bottom 4, I'm sure you also have this team there too, Williams in 7th.
Yep. I have Williams in 7th as well.
I think they've made a lot of improvements, and I think because of their leadership, they may not be quick right off the start, but I think their philosophy of break everything and figure it out until it works. I think that is they can't keep doing the same old that they have been doing the past, 10 years. James Vowell's coming in saying, well, let's break everything. Let's find something new. Yeah. I think that we're going to start to see the fruits of their labor this year. So that's why I have them in 7th.
I agree. I think they out of all 4 of those bottom teams, I think they have the largest capacity. I think they're going to have the best capacity for development, and then their X factor too really is Alex Albon. I think if Alex Albon has a similar season that he did last year, I think their ceiling is 5th or 6th. I really do. I think Alex Albon is the X factor of that team.
Yeah. So moving on to 6th place, you probably have this team here too, but I have Visa Cash App Racing Bulls in 6th place.
Yep, Visa Cash App Racing Bulls in 6th place. I think
they're on that 6th place island.
Yeah, I think they're on a 2-car island with Aston Martin. I don't think those are teams that they're obviously going to be regular points favorites, occasional Q3 favorites. I think they're going to be able to snipe at the top 5 occasionally throughout the season. and I think it's a toss up between the Racing Bulls and Aston Martin.
Yeah.
But I think sixth is a safe bet for them, which is great considering last year they got ninth. And I think they've made a lot of improvements. Also, taking a pause here for a second, another thing that I forgot to mention in terms of things that we're going to follow or controversies, storylines from testing is the controversy around Racing Bulls and the connection with them as the Red Bull second team.
Yeah.
First of all, the people saying that it is an RB19 just don't know what they're looking at and don't know what they're talking about. It is very clearly from an aero philosophy, it is a different car. They take the same amount of parts that Aston Martin takes from Mercedes and that Haas takes from Ferrari, and nobody bats an eye about those teams. Are they owned by the same company? Yes. Do they share facilities? Yes. The rules are crystal clear about what they can and cannot do. They obviously have approval from the FIA. And, and it's not an RB19 clone. We're not in the territory of the pink Mercedes.
I was literally just about to say that.
We're not in a pink Mercedes territory. And the other thing too is Zach Brown has been making a lot of noise about the relationship between Red Bull and Racing Bulls and the relationship that team has. And I got to thinking, why now? What is the timing of this? Why now? It's never been an issue because that team has always been, I think, one, it's an issue because the naming of that team is just so poor that I think that it is warranted to raise a lot of questions. But one thing that the guys at the Race F1 podcast mentioned is that Concord agreements for the 2026 Concord rules are in negotiations right now. And I think this is Zach Brown not really trying to do anything other than just create some political waves to see if he can get owner, like second teams completely outright banned, which would force Red Bull to sell Visa Cash App Racing Bulls. So yeah, I think that's really the only reason why Zach Brown is making all of this noise right now.
Whenever something like this comes up in Formula One, why is it always Zach Brown making the noise? Why is it always him? It was him with the freaking pink Mercedes.
Yep.
And they went after the freaking brake ducts. Like, you literally have a carbon copy car and you went after the brake ducts. It's clearly you're just trying to make noise. Go after just something because you want I don't know. Zach Brown, come off your high horse, bud.
I don't want this to sound mean because I really genuinely do think Zach Brown is a great leader of McLaren, and I really do like McLaren as a team, but I think it's just because he's American and he's doing it for political leverage. That's all it is. I think he's just an American doing American things.
Yeah.
And I think that's what it boils down to. So anyway, moving on to the top half of the grid in fifth place. I already mentioned it before, but I'm putting Aston Martin in fifth.
Same. Aston Martin I have in fifth place. I think now you said Visa Cash App Racing Bulls, Aston Martin could be intertwined. I think Aston Martin, if they have a season anywhere like they did last year, I think that top five, there's going to be a gap between fifth and sixth. I don't think Aston Martin and Visa Cash App are going to be as close as you said they were. I think it's going to be the top five, and there's going to be a little bit of separation between the top and the bottom.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
just a little.
Yeah, and naturally there always is around fifth or sixth.
Mm-hmm.
Because you're when you're fighting for the top five in the points, you're getting 10, 12, 15 points compared to if you're fighting for the bottom points, you're getting 1, 2, 4 points. So around that area, there's always going to be a lot of separation.
Mm-hmm.
Moving right along. So Aston Martin, we both have in fifth place. Who do you have in fourth place?
I have Mercedes in fourth place.
Are we really about to have the exact same top six? I have a feeling we're going to have the exact same top six.
I don't I don't know. Probably. Well, probably. Yeah, but I have Mercedes in fourth place.
I
I
have
think it'll
Mercedes in
be
fourth
an
too.
improved fourth place, but I think for at least with the way that things have been going and the apathy in the team, and I think fourth is their ceiling. I maybe third, but the
I
way that McLaren has been improving, I don't see them going any higher than that.
I think third is their ceiling, but honestly, I mean, we were talking about 7th through 10th, flip a coin. I think second, third, fourth, flip a coin.
Yeah.
That's truly how I feel. So I also have Mercedes in fourth, and the reason why I have Mercedes in fourth is just because I think McLaren and Ferrari showed a little bit more in testing.
Mm-hmm.
And if we're basing this only on testing, because that's really the only running that we have to base off of,
Yeah,
I'm putting them in fourth. Also, their capacity to develop the car has been very limited by their understanding of the car, and their understanding of the car is now 2 years behind.
Yeah.
So, I think they're even behind in understanding compared to Ferrari and McLaren.
Yeah.
More so McLaren than Ferrari, but I think their understanding is probably 8 to 12 months behind where McLaren and Ferrari are. So yeah. That's why I give them fourth place.
Yep. So third place. In third place, I have McLaren.
Yep.
You
McLaren
in third place.
Also have McLaren in third place. I think it's going to be a very competitive third place, and I think they are going to be
the top two a run for their money.
I think so, and I think it would be silly to not think, or it would be silly not to think that McLaren can't be regular podium favorites. I think when things go their way, they can 100% compete for the podium when it's their day. Yeah. I truly believe that is within it. Can Lando Norris win his first Grand Prix this season?
God, I hope so.
I really hope so.
He's like the most talented driver on the grid that doesn't have a win.
Yes. I really do think that this very well could be. Now, this is obviously going to be dependent on how far ahead Red Bull truly is, because I don't think anybody really knows. But can this be the season that McLaren end their winless streak, and can Lando end up on the top step?
Maybe possibly. If Charles and Max take each other out in a race.
Yeah. I very much think that is possible. And I think on their day, McLaren can be better than the second Ferrari and second Red Bull. I really do think that is a possibility.
Cool. So going into second, let's say it together, because I know we have the same top two. On 3, 1, 2, 3, Red Bull.
Ferrari.
I'm kidding, Ferrari.
Oh my God. I was like, wait, are you actually serious?
No, I had Ferrari's in second. Yeah. I think Ferrari has made a lot of improvements. They got third last year, fourth.
They got third last year.
Last year, that's what I thought. But I think they've made a lot of improvements. I think they've made a lot of improvements on the reliability of the car. They just made a lot of improvements everywhere.
Yeah,
and I don't think anyone's beaten Red Bull. So
yeah, well, that is reason number one why I have them in second is just I don't see anybody beating Red Bull. But I think the reason why I have them emphatically at the top of the top four, or at the top of this like second through fourth group, is because of how consistent their race runs were. And like Haas, finally, I think like Haas, I think they've started to come to grips with their seemingly they've started to come to grips with their tire wear problems. And I hope that rings true. I think, that car is still going to be quick over one lap. I think the Ferrari is still going to be a threat for pole anywhere they go. I think they have finally taken a page out of Red Bull's book, and I think they may have sacrificed a little of one lap pace so that way they can be stronger in the races, because that is one thing that Red Bull their entire philosophy has been in this new rule cycle has been, it doesn't matter about one lap pace. It matters about how much we can sustain pace throughout the race. And I think that is a page out of Red Bull's book that Ferrari has taken. And I think they're going to be a second, but a very emphatic second. And I think on their day, they can snipe a couple wins from Red Bull.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So with that being said, obviously first place, we both have Red Bull.
Red Bull. Yeah.
I at least right now, I don't see them being beaten.
Right. It's the way that I see Red Bull is the way that I see Alabama in college football. You know, you can never count them out. They're always going to be around to be title favorites. It just is what it is. Now, in the post Nick Saban era, who knows what's going to happen? I think Georgia is now the new dynasty. So whether it's Georgia or Alabama, I think that is Red Bull. You know, they are the Kansas City Chiefs. You know, they are, you know, they're the ones to beat, and it is absolutely wrong to bet against Red Bull right now. It's completely useless to bet against Red Bull.
Yeah. Yep, I would agree.
And so, with that being said, Red Bull are our constructors champion. Who do you think is going to be drivers world champion?
Max. Yeah. Max. If I had to pick someone else other than Max, I would say Charles, but yeah, Max.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I don't think Checo is automatically going to pull something out of the bag and be able to beat Max.
Now, what I will say, I think the cracks in the championship are going to come from if both Ferraris can consistently finish ahead of Sergio Perez. And if Sergio Perez doesn't have the beginning of the season that they have, maybe Max dominates everything. But if Ferrari are up there scoring double podiums every weekend,
maybe they can win the constructors championship.
They may have a shot. I think Ferrari's hopes at a constructors championship will hinge upon their tire wear and Sergio Perez's performance. And I think, which is why, you know, I mentioned with the whole Visa Cash App Racing Bulls thing with like Daniel Ricciardo, would they switch Perez and Ricciardo? Depending on how many points Ricciardo has, they may want to just stick with Perez because he's going to have more points than Daniel Ricciardo, you know, and if they're going to make that change, it has to be early enough that Daniel Ricciardo can really have an impact on the Constructors' Championship. So
yeah, which who knows what will happen with that, because I mean, the whole reason why they decided to put Daniel Ricciardo in that AlphaTauri seat was because they did a test at Silverstone, and where he hopped in the seat of the Red Bull, and his fastest lap time would have put him right up next to Max Verstappen on the starting grid. So,
yep, and I think Daniel Ricciardo is very capable, and if he acquits himself well at the beginning of the season, I think Red Bull have every reason to put him in that second seat. I think it's really going to depend on where they're at in the Constructors' Championship. If it's really, really tight within a point or two, maybe you pull the trigger, maybe you don't. I don't know.
Yeah.
So that will all remain to be seen. But that brings us to the end of our preseason predictions. Are there any off-the-wall, last-minute extracurricular things that you think may happen this season? I've already talked about it, how I believe that not only do I think that every driver is going to score points, or not every team is going to score points, I think every driver is going to score points. That is my prediction. It came true in 2021, and I think we're going to be in the same boat this year.
Alfa Romeo gets fourth. No, I'm just kidding. Kidding. That's not going to happen.
Well, Alfa Romeo can't get fourth because
they don't exist anymore.
Alfa Romeo doesn't exist anymore.
I guess Kick will get fourth.
Kick gets fourth.
No, absolutely not. I like your predictions of every team's going to score points and every driver's going to score points.
Yeah. I feel very, very convicted about that prediction.
I also think that'll happen with how far Haas and Williams have improved, because they were very clearly the back markers last year. I think with how, and Visa Cash App Racing Bulls, but how far they have improved this year, I think they'll be scoring points.
Yep. Well, that brings us to the end of today's episode. As a reminder, it is race week, so we will see track, and which means we will have the first installment of 24 Grand Preview episodes. So keep an eye on that. That'll come to you on Wednesday evening or Thursday morning if you're in the UK or in Europe. We will be doing that episode on Wednesday night ahead of Free Practice 1, which comes to us on Thursday, not Friday.
Yes.
Because the race is on Saturday.
Yes. It'll be after Tuesday. Thank God. Just got to get through Tuesday.
Yep. And then we'll see cars on track very, very soon.
Yes.
Any final thoughts before we wrap up?
Yeah, just make sure you follow us on social media, YouTube, Spotify, TikTok, all that stuff. And let's buckle in and get ready for a fun F1 season.
And my last thought is going to be go Liverpool, Carabao Cup champions.
We won the cup today.
Anyway, like, subscribe, do all the things, and we'll see you next time.